I'll run through each letter in the alphabet and introduce a useful word that includes that letter to illustrate its pronunciation. Let's get started. The first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Aleph. Aleph is easy to pronounce. It's silent. Aleph is the first letter in the Hebrew word Amen. Note that Aleph is on the right side of the word. Hebrew is written from right to left. The ah sound that you hear at the beginning of the word Amen doesn't come from the Aleph, it comes from the vowel underneath it. Aleph is silent. The second letter in the Hebrew alphabet is Bet. Bet makes two different sounds, B as in boy, or V as in victory. Fortunately, the rabbis came up with a trick to tell us how to pronounce Bet. If there's a dot inside the Bet, it's pronounced as in boy. If there's no dot, it's pronounced as in victory. Bet with the B sound, with the dot in it, is the first letter in the Hebrew word Baruch, which is the first word of any blessing. Bet with the victory sound, sometimes called Vet, is the last letter in the Hebrew word Tov, which means good. The third letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Gimel. Gimel makes the sound of the hard G in good or girl, never the soft G in general or bridge. Gimel is the first letter of the Hebrew word Gadol, which means great. Notice that the Gimel in Gadol has a dot in it, but the dot doesn't change the sound. Many letters can have dots in them, but only a few have a different sound when they have a dot. The fourth letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Dalet. It makes the sound of D as in door. In fact, the word Dalet means door, and you can see that the letter kind of looks like the outline of a door. Dalet is the first and the last letter in the name David, David, the great king of Israel. Note that the first Dalet has a dot in it, and the last one doesn't, but they both sound the same, David. The fifth letter of the Hebrew alphabet is He. He makes the sound of H, as in hello. Like H in English, He is silent when it appears at the end of a word. He is the first and last letter of the word Haggadah, the book we read at Passover Seder, what most Americans call a Haggadah. We've already seen all the consonants in this word. He, Gimel, Dalet, and the silent He at the end, Haggadah. The sixth letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Vav. This is a tricky one because it makes three different sounds, V, O, or U. Once again, there are dots that will help you get the right pronunciation, but there are exceptions to the rules of the dots. The exceptions will make more sense after we've covered vowels, so for now we'll just assume that Vav is following the rules. The rules are, if there's no dot, then it's a V as in victory. If there's a dot in the middle, then it's pronounced U as in Google, or sometimes like the vowel in put, or book. If there's a dot on top, then it's pronounced O as in open. Vav is the first letter of the word V'imru, a common prayer phrase that means, and let us say, to which the congregation responds, Amen. V'imru also ends with a Vav, this one in the form that's pronounced U, V'imru. The O form of Vav appears in the word Sukkot, the name of a fall holiday called the Festival of Booths in English. Note that the U form of Vav also appears in the word Sukkot. Next is Zion. Now the name of this letter sounds just like the English word Zion, which is a name for Israel, but that's just a coincidence. In fact, the Hebrew word for what we call Zion in English is Tzion. It doesn't even start with the letter Zion. Zion makes the sound of Z as in zero. Zion is sometimes confused with Vav because they're both simple, narrow letters. You can tell them apart because Zion has this little zigzag, an extension at the back. Vav doesn't have that. Zion is the first letter of the word Zaman, which means time. Either a time of day, like the Zaman for lighting candles or for saying prayers, or a special time, like a holiday. Sukkot is the Zaman Simchatenu, the time of our joy. Passover is Zaman Cherutenu, the time of our freedom. Next is Chet. That's a tricky one to pronounce because we don't have that sound in English. It's a throat-clearing sound like the German Ach, or the Scottish Loch, or like you're getting ready to hock a loogie. Chet is also tricky because it looks like another letter we've seen, He. It even sounds a little like it. You can tell them apart because He has a hole in it. The line on the left is broken at the top. Chet is the first letter in the word Chai, which means lives or living. You may have seen Jewish women wearing a necklace with the chai hanging from it. Next is the letter tet. There are no tricks here. Tet makes a T sound, as in tango. Tet is the first letter in the word tov, which means good. We've already seen all the letters in this word. Do you recognize them? There's tet, of course, which we just saw. And then there's a vav with a dot on top, which makes an O sound. Finally, there's a bet with no dot in it. With no dot, it's called vet, and it makes a V sound. Tet, O, vet, tov. If you recognize these letters, tov mode. Very good. The last letter we're going to look at in this first video is yud, the 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Yud makes the sound of Y, as in yellow. Sometimes, particularly at the end of words, yud is part of the preceding vowel, and it doesn't really make its own sound. But don't worry about that now. We'll talk about that when we get to vowels. Yud hovers above the baseline of letters like an apostrophe. No other letter in the Hebrew alphabet does that. Some may go below the baseline, and some go above the top line, but all other letters at least fill the line. That makes yud easy to recognize. Yud is the first letter of the Hebrew word yom, which means day, as in Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, or Yom Tov, good day, which is the general term for holidays. So that's the first 10 consonants of the Hebrew alphabet. There are 12 more consonants and 11 vowels, which I'll cover in other videos. I'll wrap up by showing you each of the letters we've seen and give you a second look at them, then remind you of what the name and sound of the letter is. You may want to test your memory. I'll give you a second or two to pause the video between each letter and see if you remember the letter and its sound. Alef, which is silent. Bet, which makes the sound B as in boy. Vet, which makes the sound V as in victory. Gimel, which makes the sound G as in girl or good. Dalet, which makes the sound D as in door. Hey, which makes the sound H as in hello, but is silent at the end of words. Vav, which makes the sound V as in victory. Vav with a dot in the middle, which makes the sound U as in Google, or sometimes the U in put. Vav with a dot on top, which makes the sound O as in open. Zion, which makes the sound Z as in zero. Chet, which makes a sound that doesn't occur in English, but sounds like the German ach. Tet, which makes the sound T as in tango. Yud, which makes the sound Y as in yellow. Introducing a couple of vowels. Now the Hebrew alphabet originally didn't have any vowels. The meaning of the word is in the consonants, and native speakers just know how to pronounce the words, so they don't need vowels. But the rabbis came up with a system of dots and dashes that can be added to the text to help non-natives pronounce the words. I'll show you the vowels along with the silent consonant Aleph, so you can see where the vowels go. But Aleph isn't part of the vowel. Let's start with two vowels that make the same sound, patach and kametz. They both make the ah sound of the A in father. Both of these vowels appear in the word Haggadah, the book that's read at Passover Seder. Now when you read Hebrew, it's kind of a zigzag. You read the consonant, and then its vowel, and then the next consonant, and then its vowel, and so on to the end. We've seen all the letters in the word Haggadah, so let's sound it out. Hey, and then the patach, gimel, and then the kametz, dalet, and then the kametz, and hey. Ha, ga, da. The hey at the end is silent. Haggadah. Now I just said that both patach and kametz are pronounced the same, and that's mostly true today. It's called Sephardic pronunciation, and it's the way they pronounce it in Israel. But some people pronounce kametz like the ah in saw. That's called Ashkenazic pronunciation, from Germany and Eastern Europe. A lot of Orthodox Jews still pronounce it that way, and a lot of people who learned Hebrew in the 50s or earlier. If you've heard someone start a blessing by saying Baruch Atah instead of Baruch Atah, that's Ashkenazic pronunciation. Nothing wrong with it, but most people today use the Sephardic pronunciation. There are a couple of other oddities to the pronunciation of these vowels, but I'll save that for later. The next vowel I'd like to look at is shava. Now, sometimes shava is silent. It's just a placeholder when there isn't really a vowel sound. You can see that in the name Avraham, Abraham, the forefather of Judaism. There's a shava under the vet, but there's no vowel sound after the vet. It goes right from the V sound to the R sound. Avraham. The shava there is silent. But sometimes shava makes a generic unstressed vowel sound that linguists call a schwa sound. A schwa sound is the sound of the A in alone, or the E in begin, or the U in circus. This vocal shva is the first vowel sound in the word zaman, which means time. We saw this word when we discussed the letter Zayin. I'm afraid I don't know any good way to tell whether the shva is pronounced, but I do know one useful rule. If the shva is the first vowel in the word, like zaman, it's always pronounced. This is chetaf patach. It looks like two vowels, a patach and a shva, but you can't do that in Hebrew, only one vowel per consonant. And this is one vowel. Chetaf patach makes the same ah sound as patach, but this vowel is never stressed. It's the first vowel in the word ani, which means I. Note that the ah sound is not emphasized. Chetaf patach is never stressed. Ani. The same kind of half vowel can occur with the comets. It's called chetaf comets, but you don't see that one very often. So we've got 5 vowels so far. Patach and chetaf patach, comets and chetaf comets, all of which make the ah sound, and a shava, which is either a generic unstressed vowel or it's silent. Now back to the consonants. The 11th consonant in the Hebrew alphabet is kaf. Like the letter bet, kaf makes different sounds depending on whether it has a dot in it. If there is a dot, it makes the K sound in kangaroo. If there's no dot, it makes a throat-clearing sound like the letter chet. Kaf looks a lot like the letter bet. You can tell them apart because bet has this extension at the back that kaf doesn't. Kaf is rounded. It looks like the letter C. Kaf is the first letter in the word kavod, which means glory or honor. We've seen all the letters in this word. Kaf, komets, vet, cholam vav, which is the vav with the dot on top that makes the O sound. I don't know if I gave that name before. And dalet, ka-vod, kavod. There's one other word that starts with a kaf that I'd like to look at. This word is kol. The word means all, and it's an extremely common word in the Bible and in prayer, which is particularly inconvenient because it uses a different pronunciation of the vowel komets. Now usually a komets makes an ah sound, but in the word kol, it makes an O sound. There are a few other words in Hebrew where the komets makes an O sound, but kol is the most common. I don't know of any good way to tell whether it's going to make an O sound or an ah sound, but just assume it's an ah sound unless the word is kol. When it's written without the dot, kaf is called chaf, and it makes a ch sound. Chaf doesn't usually occur at the beginning of the words, but you can see it in the word bechol, which means with all. That's just the word kol with a bet prefix stuck on the front. The bet prefix is a preposition that means in, on, with, things like that. So you have kol, which means all, and bechol, which means with all. Kaf has another unusual feature. It's written differently when it appears at the end of a word. The end of the word version is referred to as final kaf, or more commonly as final chaf, because it almost always makes that ch sound. There are 5 letters in Hebrew that have a special form at the end of a word, and kaf is the first one we've seen. Final chaf, like most of these final forms, extends below the baseline of the text. Final chaf always appears with a vowel inside it. It's always going to be either a shva or a komets. That vowel is written above the baseline of the text, not below the text line as usual. This is a peculiarity of final chaf. It doesn't happen with any other letter. Final chaf looks a lot like a dalet, but you can tell them apart because the final chaf extends below the baseline, as I said, and because it's got a vowel inside it. Dalet's vowel would be underneath. Final chaf is the last letter in the word baruch, which means blessed, and is the first word of any blessing. Do you recognize any other letters in this word? We've seen bet, komets, vav with a dot in it that makes the U sound. That's called a Ashurit, by the way, I didn't mention that. And a final kaf with a shava. Okay, that's a lot of work for one letter. Let's try an easier one. The next letter is lamed, which makes the L sound in light. Lamed is easy to recognize. It's the only letter in the Hebrew alphabet that extends above the top of the other letters. And that top part kind of looks like a capital L in English. Lamed appears twice in the word lulav, which means date palm. The word lulav also refers to a collection of palm, willow, and myrtle branches that are waved during rituals for the holiday of Sukkot. As you can see, we're making some progress because we've seen all of the letters in this word. Lamed, Shurek, another lamed, Kametz, and vet. Lu, love, lulav. The next letter is mem, which makes the sound of M as in Mary. Mem is sometimes confused with the letter tet. You can tell them apart because tet has a gap in the top. Mem's gap is at the bottom. Mem is the first letter in the word melech, which means king or ruler. Other consonants we've seen in this word are lamed, and the final form of chaf with a shva in it. Mem, like kaf, has a different form when it appears at the end of the word. This is the final form of mem. It's the only final form that doesn't extend below the baseline. Final mem appears at the end of the name Avraham, the forefather of Judaism. Some other letters we've seen in this word: the silent aleph, patach, that gives us the ah sound, vet, a silent shava, kametz, hey, another kametz, and the final mem, Avraham. The next letter is nun, which makes the sound of N as in Nancy. Nun is sometimes confused with vav or gimel because they're all narrow letters. You can tell them apart by the bottom of the letter. Vav doesn't have a baseline the way that gimel and nun do. Gimel's baseline has a gap in it. Nun has a baseline that has no gap. Nun is the first letter in the word nefesh, one of several Hebrew words for the soul. We haven't seen any other letters in this word yet, but we'll see them in part 3. Nun also has a final form that's used when the letter appears at the end of a word. Final nun is even more likely to be confused with vav. They look a lot alike, but you can tell them apart because final nun, like most final forms, extends below the baseline of the text. Vav doesn't. Final nun is the last letter in the word zaman, which means time. We've seen all the letters in this word now. Zayin, shava, mem, patach, and final nun. Zaman. We're going to wrap up part 2 with samech. Samech makes an S sound, like the first C in circle, and it looks like a circle if that helps you remember the sound. Now samech is sometimes confused with final mem. They do look a lot alike, but samech is a circle. Final mem is a square. Also, final mem can only appear at the end of the word, whereas samech can appear anywhere in a word. Samech is the first letter in the Hebrew word selah, which appears frequently in the biblical book of Psalms. It's not entirely clear what that word means. English translations of the Bible just leave it as selah. What letters do we know in this word? Well, we know samech and lamed, kametz, and hey. Selah. We've now seen 15 of the 22 consonants in the Hebrew alphabet and 5 of the 11 vowels. With just those letters, you can read 10 of the words we've seen so far. As a review, I'll show you each of those 10 words and give you a second to look at it, and then tell you the word and each letter in it. You may want to test your memory. Pause the video and see if you can read the word. Ready? Let's get started. Gadol, Gimel, Kametz, Dalet, Cholam Vav, and Lamed. Gadol. Haggadah, Hey, Patach, Gimel, Kametz, Dalet, Kametz, Hey. Haggadah. This one's a tricky one. Bechol. The trick here is that it uses the unusual O pronunciation of kametz. Bet, shva, chaf, kametz, and lamed. Bechol. Zaman. Zayin, shva, mem, patach, final nun. Zaman. Chai. Chet, patach, yud. Chai. Tov. Tet, cholam vav, vet. Tov. Yom. Yud, cholam vav, final mem. Yom. Is another tricky one. Kol. Kaf. Kametz, that's another one that sounds like an O. And lamed. Kol. Lulav. Lamed. Shurek. Lamed. Kametz. Vet. Lulav. Kavod. Kaf. Kametz. Vet. Cholam vav. Dalet. In the back of it now, seen more than half of the letters in Hebrew, and you'll find that most of the vocabulary in this part uses letters that we've already seen. So we'll be sounding out all of the words as we go along. The 16th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is ayin. Ayin is silent, like Aleph. Ayin dips just a little bit below the baseline of the text. That's an unusual feature. You don't see that in other letters except maybe in a fancy font. Ayin is the first letter of the word olam, which can mean universe, as in the phrase melech haolam, ruler of the universe, or it can mean eternity, as in leolam vaed, forever and ever. Ayin, cholam vav, lamed, kametz, and final mem. O, lam. Olam. Let's look at a few more vowels so you can read some more words. This is segol, which makes the short E sound in the word bed. The vowel appears twice in the word melech, which means king or ruler. Mem, segol, lamed, segol, and final kaf with a shva. Me, lech, melech. Like patach and kametz, segol sometimes appears with a shva, making a new vowel called chataf segol, half segol. It makes the same short E sound, but it never gets the emphasis. It's the first vowel in the word emunah, which means faithfulness or fidelity. Aleph, chataf segol, mem, shurek, nun, kametz, and hey. Emu, na, emunah. Next is tsere. It's pronounced like the A in neighbor or they. Sometimes it's followed by a yud that doesn't have a vowel of its own. When you see that, the yud is part of the tsere vowel and isn't pronounced separately. And that's the way I learned it, and that's the way I hear it in America, but I gather that in Israel, it's pronounced A when it has a yud, and E when it doesn't have a yud. Tsere appears in the word amen, a common response to prayer. Aleph, kametz, mem, tsere, and final nun. A-main, amen. But Israelis would pronounce that amen as we do in English. Tsere with a yud appears in the word aleinu, the name of a well-known prayer that's near the end of every synagogue service. The word itself just means on us, which is the first word of the prayer. Ayin, kametz, lamed, tsere with the yud, nun, and shurech. A, le, nu, aleinu. The next vowel is chirek, which is a single dot under the letter. Chirek makes an E sound like the double E in meat, or the I in machine. It's usually transliterated as an I, but it's sometimes transliterated as a double E to make the pronunciation more clear. Like tsere, it's sometimes followed by a yud that becomes part of the vowel. Also like tsere, some people say it's pronounced differently when it has a yud than when it doesn't. Some say it's pronounced as a short I in sit when it doesn't have a yud, and as the I in machine when it does have a yud. But I don't always hear it that way. There's a chirek in the name David, the name of the great king of Israel. Dalet, kametz, vav, chirek, dalet, da, vid, David. Chirek yud appears in the word chayim, which means life. Chet, patach, yud, chirek yud, final mem. Chay, yim, chayim. By the way, the ending of this word, chirek yud final mem, usually indicates a masculine plural form, not so much in this word, but most of the time that's what it means. Next is pei. Pei makes the sound of P as in poke, or F as in fox. Like bet and kaf, which we've seen before, the dot inside tells you which way it goes. If there's a dot inside, it makes the P sound. If there's no dot, it makes the F sound, or if you prefer, you can think of that as the PH sound. Pei is the first letter in the word Pesach, the Hebrew name of the Passover holiday. Pei, segol, samech, patach, and chet. Peh, sach, Pesach. Pei without the dot, which makes the F sound, is sometimes called fe. It doesn't usually appear at the beginning of a word, but it appears in the middle of the word nefesh, which means soul. We've seen most of these letters. Nun, segol, Pei without the dot, segol, and we haven't seen this one yet. Ne, fesh, nefesh. Pei is another letter that has a special final form. This is final pei. Like most final forms, it extends below the rest of the text. Final pay is the last letter in the name Yosef, Joseph, the favorite son of our forefather Jacob. Yud, Cholam Vav, Samech, Tzere, and final Fe. Yo, Safe, Yosef. Next is Tzadi. Tzadi makes a TZ sound or a TS sound that we don't really have in a single letter in English, but it's the same sound that you hear at the end of the word pants or nuts. It takes a little practice to get used to saying that at the beginning or middle of a word. Tzadi is sometimes confused with Aleph or Ayin. All of these letters have 2 points on the top, which other letters don't have. But you can tell them apart because Aleph doesn't have a line on the bottom. Ayin has a line on the bottom, but it's diagonal and it tends to extend below the baseline. Ayin has 2 shafts that go all the way down, more or less straight. Tzadi really just has 1 shaft, and it goes diagonally from the top left corner to the bottom right corner. Tzadi is the first letter in the word tzedakah, which is usually translated as charity because it refers to helping the poor, but the word actually means righteousness, because helping the poor is the right thing to do, not just a nice thing to do. We've seen most of the letters in this word: tzadeh, shuvah, dalet, kametz, we haven't seen this one yet, and another kametz, and hey, tzedakah, tzedakah. Tzadeh also has a final form. Like most final forms, it extends below the baseline. Final tzadeh is the last letter in the word eitz, which means tree, as in the popular liturgical song Eitz Chaim, Tree of Life. Ayin, Tzere, and final tzadeh, eitz. The next letter is kuf. Kuf makes a sound like the K in kangaroo. Scholars often transliterate it as a Q to distinguish it from kaf, which also makes a K sound, and also because it comes from the same source as the letter Q in English, but it's usually transliterated as a K. Kuf kind of looks like a final form because it extends below the baseline, but actually kuf can appear anywhere in a word. Kuf is the only non-final letter that extends this far below the baseline. Kuf is the first letter in the word kadosh, which means holy. Kuf, kametz, dalet, cholam vav, and we haven't seen that one yet, but really there's not much left. We'll get to that one soon. Ka-dosh, kadosh. Okay, we're going to wrap up part 3 here. There are only 3 more consonants and 2 more vowels, but we'll cover those in part 4, along with a couple of other things. I'll finish with a little review. I'll show you 23 different Hebrew words that we've seen so far that you've seen all the letters of. I'll give you a second to look at the word before I tell you what it is and what it means. See if you can read the word and remember what it means. You may need to pause the video. Melech, which means king or ruler. Haggadah, the book that is read at Passover Seder. Olam, which means universe or eternity. Ani, which means I. Tzedakah, which means charity or righteousness. Lulav, which means date palm and refers to the collection of branches we wave at Sukkot. Eitz, which means tree. Kavod, which means glory or honor. Amen, a response to prayer. Aleinu, which means upon us and is the name of a well-known prayer. Yosef, which is the name Joseph. Chai, which means lives or living. Gadol, which means great. Pesach, the Hebrew name of the Passover holiday. Tov, which means good. Emunah, which means faithfulness or fidelity. Yom, which means day. Selah, another response to prayer. Kol, which means all. Chayim, which means life. Zaman, which means time. Bechol, which means with all.